This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, and I have the excellent Stephen Winkelman with me here.
Hello.
From Android Police. I want to talk about the news mostly today, honestly. There's not a lot of reviews happening right now.
No, it's a slow time this year.
Well, we're kind of waiting for the things to launch, as it were. So, you saw the topics. I think it's mostly little things, and some things that I think we could kind of develop on a little bit. I feel like Google Pixel 6a, we know it's coming. They announced it at I/O. We know it's like July 21st or something. And we're starting to see leaks. And, that doesn't surprise me. Every time a Pixel has come out in the last, 2-3 years, we've seen leaks.
Yeah, Google can't keep a secret. They're like, I don't know what's going on there, but Google can't manage to keep anything under wraps until it's time.
So are you excited about this phone? Because I'm usually very excited with the A series. They always kick ass. They're great value, great price, great features. You don't seem too excited.
I'm not yet, but I think once it comes out, I will be.
Okay. You're just waiting to see.
Yeah, I never get excited about them when I use them. They're actually really good phones. So and they've worked out. Hopefully, they've worked out the kinks with Tensor.
Well, that I don't expect. I mean,
Yeah.
I look. This is actually the negative for me as a Pixel 6 Pro user. I haven't had too many of the issues with the bugs. I've had some bugs, but my phone is my daily, and it gets the job done, and I'm happy with it. It's not as fast as, say, a Galaxy S22 Ultra, which is another phone I use regularly. So, yes, Tensor is, to me, in a way, kind of the thing that limits Pixel today. And I think they did it because they wanted to get out of the clutches of Qualcomm or something.
Yeah.
But now you're in the clutches of Samsung, so I don't know if it's a good idea. I personally don't feel like it adds anything to the table that you couldn't do on a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. And, all this, extra cores for ML and AI, is it really paying off? My photos are not processing that much faster than they were on a Qualcomm, and they don't look that much better. So, I'm not complaining about it, but I feel like it's one of the negatives in my experience on the Pixel 6 Pro. Now, we're going to inherit that on the 6a, but on the positive, compared to the other A phones, which were very bland, and that's why probably, like me, I wasn't super excited about the 5A last year. I was like, okay, it looks like just a slightly refreshed 4A. And then they lowered the price. They added, water resistance. They made the screen narrower and taller, which is easier to hold. Just overall, once I started using it, I was just like, I still don't think aesthetically this is a really exciting phone, but holy crap, what a great phone to use. And I think this is going to be a great phone to use.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, and I think that at some point that after you look at and review hundreds of phones, you start to realize that they can't keep reinventing the wheel forever. I mean, you can still do fun things, but at some point it comes just down to being practical and what people need. And Google does a good job of hitting that without being overly expensive. The Tensor is fine to me.
It's fine.
It's nothing it's not groundbreaking. I don't think it's bad, but it's not. It does what you need it to do. I don't know how fast a phone really needs to be. I do, but it should I'd say 80% of people, it's going to be a perfect phone for its lifespan.
I think for me, what it is if I look at the flagships, sphere this year, and maybe even going back to last year, since you were writing more about phones then, it's flagships are all really good. And I still think the Tensor flagships today are falling in that category. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
But in the same way as people with an Exynos Samsung phone have been complaining that it's not quite on par with their experience using a Qualcomm phone, I'm feeling that too. And my point of reference is, even OnePlus, who's no longer making the most optimized software because Oxygen is now built on ColorOS, right, is delivering a smoother initial, at least, experience on a brand new phone that I was getting with my 6 Pro. And Samsung, which is recording for those of you watching on Patreon right now, the S22 Ultra, same thing. And I can't help myself but to go that kind of like the fastest phone I've used this year in terms of responsiveness is the Oppo Find X5 Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like telepathically fast. It feels like the OnePlus phones at the heyday, the 7 Pro, when it would think ahead of you when you were in Gmail, triaging your email. Like somehow you felt like you were like becoming one. I've never felt that with any other phone other than the Find X5 Pro recently. I don't feel it on my Pixel. I almost feel it on the Samsungs. And that's what I'm talking about. When you reach that thing, you get that on the iPhone. Yeah. You get that kind of like everything is flowing.
Like I sort of never thought about that because like this is probably not awesome to admit since I work for an Android site. I use an iPhone as my primary phone, but
the truth is revealed.
Well, everyone figured out my work the first week when I sent a screen cap by accident on an iPhone. But like that's the thing is like this is the first time like I've never like been super excited about Samsung, but the Galaxy S22 Ultra, like I actually had to buy my own phones when I left PC Mag. I couldn't use review units anymore. And like I use that phone like every day as my work phone, and it's the first Android phone that I have really felt like is on par with like iPhone, where it like guesses what you're doing, and like it just sort of works. It just works. Like everything just sort of works perfectly. And I also own a Pixel 6, and I feel like you're right. It's not quite there. Like I could never put my finger on what is not right about it, but that's it.
For me, it's the gestures. I'm kind of new to the gestures. I adopted the gestures this year. After Android 12 phones came out, I finally decided, everybody's telling me to use the gestures. It's a better experience. Maybe I should just like go for it because I was like kind of set on the buttons.
Yeah.
And a specific button layout, back button on the left was my thing. Sorry, folks, for those of you who are Samsung users who still have your button on the right, it's wrong. Okay. But my point is that I feel like it just... Every time I try to use the back gesture is great, but the scroll up and hold to get the recent apps or scroll up to go back home, half the time something happens that I don't want it to happen, or there's this bug where the whole kind of home screen freezes until I hit the power button and power again, and I don't have to restart the phone. It's just like unlock it again and then everything's fine. And I don't know. I know it's me. But I don't know why I'm using the gesture in such a way that the phone freezes up like that. And I'm like, that alone slows me down immensely. And I also find that as I'm fumbling around with gestures sometimes, I accidentally hit something and start an app or whatever that I didn't want to. And so maybe it's me partially. Maybe it's the way the gestures are implemented on the Pixel. I don't want to blame the Pixel for this. But I don't have as much of an issue with the S22 doing the same thing with the same gestures. And so that's kind of my, we can go on about the Pixel 6a, and the Pixel 6s in general, but I'm really looking forward to this Pixel 6a because if they can meet a price point that's even lower than the 6, which is already such a breakthrough value, I am super on board. I just really think Google made the wrong decision with Tensor. I think it's not helping their case with these optimizations and performance issues that we're seeing already on the 6 and 6 Pro.
Well, I think like there's like the one elephant in the room that you're not mentioning about Samsung when you're talking about gestures, which is their absolutely hideous Samsung Pay gesture. Like whenever you swipe up, like you can turn it off. But
like I'm a purist. I only have Google stuff on my phone, and then the apps that I need. I will literally disable and remove their clock, calendar, and calculator app and replace it with Google's. I'm a pure Nexus turned Pixel user, and even when I set up phones for my mom or my friends and they're non-Google phones or non-even Moto phones that are kind of purish Android, I remove all that crud, put it in a folder, hide it from them. If I can't disable it, disable if I can, uninstall, because I'm so used to like those are the apps I use and they're mission critical to me. A calendar, a clock, I needs to be the same on every phone. So I don't care about their clock not working.
Well,
or app or Google. I mean, I'm surprised you even use Samsung Pay. Who uses Samsung Pay?
I don't, but I'm too lazy to turn it off. So every time I pick it up and like swipe up in the morning, I'm like, oh well, there's Samsung Pay. I guess I gotta turn that off. So, but like the people who don't turn it off, that's literally the world's worst part of Samsung is they have that gesture for that. But
So anyway, we'll see what happens with this phone. Like, check out the renders. I'm going to link to a GSM Arena story in the show notes. And folks, as I mentioned, if you are not watching this on video, you should check out my Patreon because you can watch this on video before the audio version. It's also less edited and more raw, and you get to see us debate and be ourselves and sometimes, brandish. I'm going to pull out a phone here. Weird, cool phones like this Honor Magic 4 Pro. Anyway, patreon.com/TNKGRL. And so the next thing I want to talk about is kind of interesting because I think you at PC Mag with Sasha used to cover this a lot. Mm-hmm. The difficulty of importing phones, mm-hmm. right? The difficulty of phones not coming to our markets.
Yeah.
And as a early adopter tech savvy audience that my listeners are, like you are going to be that audience. You might sometimes go like, oh, I want to get an Oppo Find X5 Pro because Miriam says it's the fastest phone she's ever used.
Yeah.
So the Nothing Phone 1, which as you know is getting all the hype in the news cycle right now, is not coming to the US, they revealed. And my team at Pocket Now, in case you don't listen to the show all the way to the end, to all the promo stuff, I'm now the managing editor of Pocket Now for the last 2 weeks. But you knew that if you listened to the podcast all the way, right? But the point is, my team there wrote a really interesting article. I actually kind of discussed with them what we should say. And it was like 3 reasons why you're not getting this phone. Because a lot of fans are going to be disappointed. I'm disappointed too. I was actually really hoping that Carl, with his OnePlus Cloud from the old days, would have been able to convince T-Mobile at least to carry this.
Yeah.
But I think they might have actually been on board, but I don't think they had the financials. So that's one reason. I think that the financials to create a SKU that was at the RF front end, universal enough to support all the US bands we need, especially the ones for T-Mobile, like band 71, LTE 600 megahertz. Or they didn't have the supply chain throughput to get a global launch. They needed to focus on one market. Example, last year we talked about Google Pixel. Pixel 5a last year, only US and Japan because of COVID. And if Google can pull that off with their billions of dollars, you got a problem. So I think there's a combination of supply issue and having to make a custom SKU because it's really hard to make a phone that has universal bands worldwide in one SKU. Again, it's about the RF front end. The chip supports all the band, but you need an amplifier for the radio frequency, RF, the front end, that's the amplifiers, stuff by the antennas for each band. And that adds cost and real estate on the board. And that's why you often see like a European SKU of a phone and a US SKU of a phone that might have the same specs other than the bands. So my takeaway on this is I'm not surprised, I'm bummed, but there's also 2 more reasons, right? And that's the ones that Sasha is always kind of preaching, is nobody buys $500 phones in the US. I mean, you and I, we would, you might.
Yeah.
It's just, in general, people buy through their carriers. They get a deal, a promo through the manufacturer like Apple or Samsung, and they buy a monthly thing. They don't see the total cost of it. It's probably more than the phone was worth. The reality is they trade something in. I traded in 2 phones and I got a Galaxy Z Flip 3 for my spouse, $180 last year. So my point is this happens a lot and people take advantage of that. I can't blame them. So we all end up with flagships in the US unless you're really low income and you are, limited to like maybe the prepaid market. And if you're not tech savvy and you don't know to go on Amazon and buy like a Poco or something, and you're just going to use an LTE, so you're fine. You're going to suffer with like a LG that's 2 years old or like some Moto G phone. I mean, not suffer. Moto Gs are nice. It's just, speaking of Moto, by the way, we're in Moto's headquarters right now recording this podcast. They were kind enough while I'm visiting Chicago to lend a room so we could do the show. So thanks to Moto. I feel like this is, this thing where $500 phones, unless you're a hardcore fan that buys unlocked, it's a hard sell in the US. And the carrier's looking at too. They're like, give us a $300 phone like the OnePlus N20 5G, or give us a flagship at 7, 8, 9,
I think I have like a bit of a high horse about this, which I push like really hard. $500 is a hard price range because like you said, it's not appealing, but the $300 price range works for people. So like Moto Gs and stuff like that are actually, like, they're very good phones for what they cost. And when you think about, especially in the US, you have like a big population of people who are unbanked that can't like just go on Amazon and buy something unless like it's a lot of work and they have to get a gift card. So they end up going through like MVNOs or like their carrier and getting whatever the carrier has. And, you know, that's usually what's affordable because, you know, the federal minimum wage in the US is still like $7.25 an hour.
It's terrible, yeah.
So like if you're like a mom, like a single mother, like working at a Family Dollar in Arkansas, like buying a Moto G is like a week's, like more than a week's paycheck by the time taxes come out. So when you say like when, like it really bothers me when reviewers are like, oh, don't buy the Moto G, it's $300. You should pick the Pixel 6a instead, it's $500. Like, that's like literally another
it's
paycheck.
A stretch.
Yeah, like
there's no way.
Yeah, it just like it doesn't work. So, and most people don't need, like, you know, like we and like your readers and listeners like use different, have more needs than the average person. But someone like my sister or my mother, like, you know, they just use like whatever is easy. They don't like, they're not gaming or doing anything that really need a ton of power. So
yeah. And so, you know, keep that in mind. Some people can't get credit, and if you can't get credit in the US, it's really difficult. You know, everything is based on borrowing money in this country. So, so the reality is that's another kind of knock against them bringing it here is that it's hard to market a phone at a price point, especially even, you know, the third part, which is related to that, is the carriers. The carriers come in and they're like, we want a phone that's going to be successful for us. And we want a phone that's cost effective or whatever, right? Unless you're Samsung and Apple, and then you're kind of pre-approved, as it were.
Yeah.
So OnePlus went through this. We saw it. It took forever. And it wasn't until the 6T? Yeah, I think it was the 6T, which was the first OnePlus phone. We got in the US through T-Mobile. It was a big deal. Was it T? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, T-Mobile.
And it's funny that it was called the 6T and it was T-Mobile because they had done the 3T before that. Anyway, I digress. And the 5T. But I feel like for me, you know, if OnePlus, backed by BBK Group, couldn't get in until the 6, you know, their fourth phone, because 1, 2, 3, 5, fifth phone, if you don't count the variants on the T and non-T, it's like, you know, nothing is nothing to stand on, pardon the pun. Like, it's like CalPay is well known, but this is still a startup that doesn't have quite the funding. And T-Mobile is probably like, you can't give us the bands we want, we can't have you. You know? Verizon's too conservative. AT&T is probably too conservative too.
Yeah.
So in the end, this is kind of the situation we're in. So yeah, it sucks. And I'm really bummed for those of you who are like super exciting. But here's the reality, folks. Like I always say, if you live in most urban markets or suburban markets in the US and you're on T-Mobile or AT&T, you can import almost any phone today and get LTE. That's pretty much generally going to work great for you. It's in rural areas where some of the, you know, 600 megahertz bands like 71 on T-Mobile and stuff are more beneficial to you, that you're probably going to fall back to 3G or 2G if it exists for that carrier anymore. I mean, there's no 3G and 2G for AT&T, so you're kind of SOL there.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, it's not impossible. Like I do it all the time. So yeah, 5G is going to be probably unlikely. But here's the interesting thing. Speaking of which, I have 2 Chinese phones, you know, they're global models, but they're, you know, not sold here ever.
Yeah.
And they don't have the bands for this market that are pinging 5G logo on AT&T. But unlike just putting up the 5G logo, which a lot of foreign phones do, but then they only connect via LTE, they just see a 5G capable carrier and they put the 5G logo, but when it comes time to connect, they can't find a band. So they put 4G. These are actually connecting on 5G on AT&T here in Chicago. So it's the only market I've ever experienced that in. So I did like a 300 down, 40 up on AT&T. Like T-Mobile wouldn't surprise me too much. But AT&T, you know how they whitelist their phones. There's a whole bunch of things. Apparently, they don't whitelist their phones. It's just that there's very few foreign phones that have bands that are compatible. And these somehow do in this market, which I think is probably mid-band.
Yeah, it's that. Well, so it is mid-band, but also like where we're like around Motorola, the carriers put a lot of towers that sort of work better than you would expect.
Like test towers or
Yeah,
something?
like literally when you walk outside of Merchandise Mart here is the one that Verizon always tells people to test on if they're in Chicago. If you go to Fulton Market, there's a bunch of them over there where Google is. So like you can find, and like weirdly on the southwest side of Chicago, like really far south, there's like some really like weird towers that are the only ones in the city that we would use for testing a PC Mag. So like I think that's probably why like Chicago, like for its goods and its bad, has really good 5G service. Like
Yeah. So I'm discovering that if you import one of the most recent flagships or mid-range phones, because they also work on mid-range, that has 5G bands for global markets that are made by Xiaomi or Honor or the BBK group, Realme, Oppo, Vivo, you're going to get 5G in some cases in some urban markets on T-Mobile and AT&T in the US. You're starting to, because they're rolling out mid-band more and more, which are the bands that actually overlap with the four. It's low band. Very few compatible low band exist abroad.
yeah.
And right now, most 5G was low band. So, you know, it might not be a lost cause to possibly use that nothing phone, but they've already been very clear. Like they're already distancing themselves in their PR. Like we are not going to guarantee anything. And they already said absolutely zero support for Verizon. And you know, that is always true. I have had a few global Chinese phones work on Verizon. And what happens is you put the SIM in, you start the phone, you get the bars, you get the LTE. And literally within 30 seconds, it goes no signal.
Yeah.
It's like Verizon is detecting a device that they don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's taking it off their network.
Yeah, it's when they're not certified. When they don't certify through Verizon, they knock off of them.
I don't see that with unlocked phones that are not necessarily officially certified, but are sold for the US market.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's a recent thing too. It didn't used to do that. I used to sometimes be able to put a Verizon SIM in a Chinese phone and get 4G, only 4G, not even voice, because they don't do 3G and 2G because they have legacy CDMA for that. So, and they don't support VoLTE, some of these phones.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do phone calls, but I got text messages and I could do data, which was fine. But now they've even turned that off. Like somehow they detect it and they're like, meh. And I guess, you know, that's fair. Yeah, so if you're on Verizon, switch carriers. I mean, why are you still on Verizon anyway? Do you need millimeter wave? That's the only thing that's kind of cool about Verizon, in my opinion. George is going to hate me for saying this, but look, it's not that Verizon's bad. They have extremely good network, really good performance. If you live in an area that has Verizon and it works for you, by all means. I always say this to people, right? As people ask me, what carrier? I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does. There's cost differences. I have my preferences. I can tell you what my preferences are. But ultimately, my first question to you is, where do you work and live, and where do you get good signal on what carrier? That should be your first decision. Then your budget. And then if you're like me, things like network performance and coverage. But most people don't need the coverage. The reality is most people don't spend their time traveling across the US, going to the middle of the cornfields in freaking, I don't know, Minnesota or whatever. It's like not happening. So the reality is you're probably going to be fine. But that being said, I think that there are some cases where if you're like the audience here that is a bit picky, for me, in terms of performance, value, if I look at all the things, especially international roaming, which to me is very critical because I live in two countries, Canada and the US, I want T-Mobile. And T-Mobile, by the way, recently, this is not a news item on our list, but they just released an improvement on their roaming plan where now they support full speed roaming internationally in all the markets where they had that slow roaming for free. So now it's for free, fast roaming anywhere in the world. 5 gigabytes is what you get. So when I'm in Canada, it cuts me off after 5 gigs and I go down to Edge. But thankfully, I've got a SIM for Canada. But it's really nice to not have to worry about that. I can continue using my main phone, not even switch SIMs, and be perfectly happy.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Like I do like Verizon a lot. I think like their service is good and like
you get what you pay for.
Yeah, but that said, like I use T-Mobile on my phone because I do travel internationally a lot, and like it's just like so much easier than having to deal with like, you know, like if you go to Spain, it's like such a pain to buy like a SIM. You know, like
Yeah.
some countries it's like really annoying to buy a SIM in, and this is fine enough. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's not spectacular,
But now
good enough.
it's going to be great.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
You know, and in Canada they've always had the high speed roaming.
Yeah.
So I've experienced that for a while. But the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, AT&T to me is like the greatest loser here, because Verizon at least has, you know, millimeter wave as an incentive if that's something you're near. Like I live near it in San Francisco. It's really nice to have. I don't use it a lot, but every now and then, like my home internet is actually slower than using millimeter wave for some stuff. So if I want to upload a YouTube video for my channel, sometimes it's faster to just walk half a block to the coffee shop, sit there with my phone with a MPEG 4 file on it, and upload it to YouTube, you know?
Yeah.
But the point is that, you know, you pay a lot of money, but you get good coverage and good service. That's Verizon. AT&T, I feel like you get a lot of money, you get good coverage, but I don't think you get as good like cell service. When I say service, I don't mean like customer service. I mean cell service. I don't feel that they're quite as good because they don't quite have the 5G, you know, as well developed yet. They're just coming out with rolling out their mid-band now, and Verizon's rolled out their mid-band already. And T-Mobile's the most, I think, other than millimeter wave, and which they have, but they don't talk about it now anymore. Neither does AT&T.
Yeah.
They have the most developed 5G in the country right now, right? And so and to me, it's also a value proposition, and the roaming and stuff. Like if you are like switching phones a lot, like to use global, like foreign phones, and you want a carrier that's friendly to that, and you want good 5G, and you're willing to be a bit less on the coverage side, like if you're in the boonies, sometimes it might not work. But the performance, once it works, is really good.
Yeah.
That's T-Mobile, right? And for me, those are the things, you know? So I think that's kind of where I'm at with that.
T-Mobile is definitely the easiest for like switching phones and stuff, because Verizon is very, like, you can get yourself, I've gotten myself in trouble with switching my SIM at Verizon, so. And AT&T, like, I've not used, I mean, no comment. But,
I mean, honestly, I'm fine. If AT&T is the only thing that works at your work and your home, I get that. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying, like, to me, if I had to rank the carriers, that's how I would do it. T-Mobile number one for me, and I think for most early adopter tech-savvy folks, if you have it in your area. Verizon's number two, and AT&T is number three. And that's kind of how I rank them. Anyway, that's all about the nothing phone. No, it's a very important tangent. I think this is going to happen again and again and again. We're going to see a really cool phone come out that is really hyped, but not, probably this is, you know, overhyped, of course. But I think it's going to have some redeeming qualities. It's going to be a really decent phone when we review it. I think that Kalpe is taking the model that he launched at OnePlus with the Nord series and, you know, turning that into what nothing is now, adding the design and the LEDs and the blinking and the coolness to it. But I think this is why, I don't know the price. Nobody does. I'm betting it's in the $500 to $600 range. It's not a flagship, but it's a premium, a really premium mid-ranger. And so as such, you're going to see more phones coming in from even the big players that are not going to first launch in the US and eventually going to launch because of this supply chain, carriers, the price point. So, you know, this article kind of walks you through that. Check it out. Speaking of phones that are also available in the US officially, but maybe not with all the perfect band support, but at least better band support than, you know, just buying a phone on Amazon from Realme or Xiaomi. The ZTE or ZTE, if you're Canadian, Axon 40 Ultra is now officially available in the US for $800, which, for the specs, that's a pretty damn great price. You get 3 64 megapixel cameras on the back, a telephoto ultra wide, and a main OIS and the whole trimmings. You get a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. You get a beautiful 120 hertz AMOLED in the front with an in-display camera, which we know is a gimmick and probably doesn't work as well. But it makes the phone look really cool. And unlike the Fold from Samsung, that you can't see the camera. It's really well hidden. And good batteries, fast charging. I think the only thing it's missing is wireless charging, which is a bummer.
I don't care about that. Like,
I think it's table stakes.
Yeah.
You make a phone for more than $600, it has to have wireless charging. The iPhone SE has wireless charging. It costs $400.
Yeah.
Like, to me, this is critical. I'll tell you why. I love it because I use it, but that's not the only reason. I think that it's a feature. It's like you have a checklist when you make a phone at that price point. It includes wireless charging.
Yeah.
In fact, if you're a Chinese company, it includes over 50-watt wireless charging.
Yeah.
And that is an absolute must-have. And I'll tell you why it's important. Because I review cars. And almost every single car, even the cheapest Toyota I played with recently, has a Qi charging pad in the console. And why? Because it has Android Auto.
Yeah.
And it's wireless Android Auto. So you don't want to come into your car, plug in your phone to charge it and connect to Android Auto. You throw it on the pad and bang, you're on Android Auto, and you don't lose your battery while you're using Android Auto because it's charging at the same time.
So can I tell you, I have wireless Android Auto in my car, and I never even think about it. I just plug my phone in anyway.
Yeah, no, but look, I'm just saying, like, that's the thing. You probably have an Android phone that has wireless charging, so try it sometime. You see, it's liberating. You just throw it on the charging pad, wireless Android Auto, you're done.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose battery because the charging isn't, this is regular Qi, not like 10 watt, not like high speed Qi. So you're still going to deplete your battery, but at a much lower rate.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, I mean, I know when I use Android Auto on my Pixel 6 Pro, it doesn't matter whether you're wireless or wired, it gets hot AF. Whether it's charging or not, it's working overtime, at least on the Tensor chip.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, it's one of the hottest it gets is when I use Android Auto on any car that I review. Thankfully, my daily driver is a Tesla, and it doesn't have Android Auto or CarPlay, and it has two Qi charging pads, high speed. I think they're 15 watt, and it's awesome. My spouse and I just throw our phones on there. They're down there in the center console. We don't look at them.
Yep.
You know, notifications pop up on the big screen anyway via Bluetooth. So, like, a lot of people don't understand that even though the Teslas don't have wireless Android Auto or CarPlay or even wired, you don't need it because the infotainment system is so good, and it still gets you. Your calendar is connected, your contacts are connected, your text messages are working, MMS is working, and Bluetooth audio is working. Yeah. You pretty much have access to your entire phone. Like, it's there. It's just not done. It's done inside Tesla's world. Yeah. And Tesla's world is so well thought out as a user experience that honestly, I find that Android Auto and CarPlay are just annoying me when I'm in another car. Like, it's better than the built-in stuff they have most of the time, but I don't need it. Like, I really think that it's possible to make a car that has a better experience, that's more optimized for that experience, for the driving, for the task at hand, than what Android Auto and CarPlay deliver. You know, that's my opinion. But I think that for most cars that have crappy infotainment systems, Android Auto and CarPlay save the day.
I think
every day. Yeah. Anyway, so ZTE Axon 40 Ultra coming to the US. See, this has been great. We have a tangent on every topic. This is exactly how I like the show. Because like we talked about wireless charging and Android stuff, and CarPlay and stuff on the Axon. We talked about the bands on the nothing, and we talked about Tensor on the Pixel. Yeah. Okay.
But Axon, the one, like, I think, like, I mean, the other, like, to me, like, it's not a deal breaker either, but it doesn't have, it's not waterproof. It doesn't have IP rating, right?
Well, so here's the thing you have to understand. Every single phone that I've played with that's more than $300 or $400.
They just don't buy it.
They all have, you can see they all have a seal around the SIM slot. Yeah. If you see that, you're guaranteed they have some water resistance.
They just haven't paid for the license.
They haven't paid for it.
Yeah. But the bigger thing is the update thing. Like, I'm not.
Okay, well, you know, that is going to happen no matter what. Like, I hate to say this, but we're going to talk about Poco in a second. Xiaomi's track record on phone updates is abysmal. And even BBK Group in general, unless it's OnePlus or you buy the super fancy Oppo that costs 1,500 euros, even then you maybe get a year or two of updates and you might get the next OS. Like, it's just like, you don't buy these phones for that. My audience changes phones every 6 months to a year. Yeah. So while I 100% agree with you, that's super critical. Yeah. It's super critical for your mom and my spouse and people who are going to keep a phone for 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And don't buy that phone or give it to any family member because they're not going to get updates at all. No. Like, look at it this way. I've reviewed almost every Red Magic, which, as you know, is a sub-brand. Nubia is a sub-brand of ZTE, right? Yeah. Like, I've reviewed almost every single one of their gaming phone. And literally, I never understand why anybody would buy one, simply because every 6 months you get a slightly improved with a new chip version of last year's phone. Like, nothing changes really overall. And so if you buy this phone now, 6 months later, you'll say, well, I no longer have the fastest gaming phone, one. and I'm not going to get any updates. So you're going to automatically buy the new Red Magic, right? Because it's also affordable. So like, it's a moot point. The audience who buys this phone doesn't care about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and they have to make, like, it's weird because I worked like 2 years ago with a carrier to build a phone, like, and I learned like a lot about the stuff that you have to give up. Like, you can't just like go to a factory and say like, I want this part, this part, this part, this part, this part. Like, you have to sort of like make concessions like to get your price point right. And like, there's certain things that like, if you want X and Y, like it's going to really screw up the price. So to me, like the update thing, like I think it's fine. The IP thing is fine, but the wire, like I know what you're saying. Like, wireless charging is good, but like I don't think it's.
It's not critical.
No, it's not a deal breaker. Like, I mean, either you like it or you don't.
Like, I just feel like if you spend that kind of money on a phone, you should get it. There's no ifs or buts.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Poco. They launched 2 new phones. I got one of them. The Poco F4 5G I've got not on me right now. It's in my bag in my hotel room. I unboxed it. Video coming up on my YouTube channel, folks. Okay, the F4 5G is interesting because it is essentially their flagship. And if you look at the specs, this is a killer phone. It's about 400 euros, which is about $420 US. And here's what you get. Laundry list. Snapdragon 870, as we all know, short of going to an 888 or 8 Gen 1, the 870 being an 865 plus, is an incredibly efficient and powerful chip. And a lot of Chinese quote-unquote gaming phones that are, and I say quote-unquote because they're not necessarily looking like game phones, but they're meant for people who game a lot, who want a mainstream phone, have the 870 today. And it's so affordable now that you can find phones for 400 euros with it. So this phone is a really good value. 870 LPDDR5 and UFS 3.1 RAM and storage. You get tons of, I think 128 is at least the minimum, I'm sure. You get stereo speakers, you get 120 Hertz AMOLED, you get 64 megapixel camera with OIS. So this is interesting because we're starting to see BBK Group and Xiaomi Group adding OIS at the mid-range now on their phones. And they've always omitted it because of cost, but also because, I've always been obsessed. As an imaging person who loves camera phones, to me, having optical image stabilizations adds that extra layer of just hardware to make your low light photography better. Your shutter speeds are going to be just slightly shorter. I mean, you can do a lot with computational photography. Like you can do anti-shake really well with EIS, right? Electronic stabilization. But as soon as you do that, you're adding, you're processing your image more and you're adding another layer of slightly longer shutter speeds, etc. And so just having OIS as a closed loop, completely independent system in the camera that just constantly compensates automatically, regardless of what the ISP is doing. It's just a bonus. And so I always advocate for it. And I'm always impressed to see it on phones like the original Nord or the Nord 2 at $500 or now this Poco or the current king of affordable OIS phone, the Realme 9 Pro Plus, which is a $300 US phone with OIS. And has a Sony IMX766 nonetheless, a really good sensor for $300. So this, I don't know what the sensor is. It's a 64. I don't think it's a Sony. It's probably a Samsung sensor. Probably not as good, but it's nice to see OIS on a phone at this price point from Xiaomi. Because Xiaomi, usually you have to go to like their flagships to get it. Like literally their latest Snapdragon phones, right? So nice. Also 67 watt charging, 4,500 milliamp hour battery, a dual cell setup, so it charges faster. I mean, look, it's got everything. And not wireless charging, but at that price point, you don't expect that. Also, it's missing a headphone jack, which lots of Pocos have had in the past. But look.
It also has dual speakers, which is sort of.
Yeah, almost like every phone in China has dual speakers.
That's like, in the US, like that's sort of like, you don't expect that. And like, oddly enough, like, Xiaomi's like to me, like Xiaomi is really good at audio. Like their like speakers are some of the best that you can find. Like I 100%.
think, and this carries down. Like I have their $300 phone. I reviewed just before I started Pocket Now. I reviewed for Elena at Geekspin the mid ranger, which is the X4 Pro 5G $300 phone. And dude, the sound on that thing sounds almost as good as the Xiaomi 12 Pro, which is their top of line Harman Kardon branded beast, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing and same with BBK Group. Half their phones have dual speakers and sound decent, you know?
Yeah.
Like Apple has that too. Like the freaking SE has dual speakers and sounds great. Like how is it that so many phones have mono speakers in Android land? And in the US, like you have to go to like Samsung flagships to get stereo.
They have ones that are like front facing and bottom facing, like, you know, front porting, bottom porting, which like sort of like makes it sound wonky, like it's off balance. It's sort of weird that Samsung or Android, like so many phones do that, and that you like it's almost impossible to find a US budget phone with a speaker. Or stereo.
Yeah. So if you're waiting for this year's flagship from Poco, like flagship, it's not really a flagship. I think of it more as a mid-ranger at this point. But for them, it's the best phone they make in terms of specs. So there it is. It's here. It's available. Comes in pretty colors. It looks nice. It's plastic frame and glass back. And, you know, like the big thing happening in Chinese phones this year, like overwhelmingly, even at the lower budget price points, all the way to the high end, unless they have one of those displays like the Pixel 6 Pro, which has the waterfalls, like the edges, all of them have the slab sides like the iPhone. Yeah. Like the, you know, iPhone 12, iPhone 13, where now there might not be metal sides, but they all, even the Nothing has that. It's like the trend in Android this year. They all want to look like iPhones from a distance.
Yeah, and this is the last year iPhone will look the same, right?
Yeah,
this is third year,
yeah. But last year's phone from all these companies were
I remember,
like much more tapered, right?
Yeah.
And you know, some people don't like the slab size because it feels it digs into their hands. But you're gonna put a case on your phone anyway, so why are you talking about that? It doesn't matter. I actually like the slab size. I like the kind of more squarish looking phones, like the Note the S22 Ultra. I call it the Note. You know?
Yeah, I mean that's what I have it like. I don't use a case, which is stupid, but like that's why I like the way it feels in here. And like I think they feel different. Like this just feels. I mean, this also has a giant case on it, but this just feels a little thinner, and it's just like it's nice.
This is such a premium feeling.
Yeah, it's a good phone.
The only phone that I still think feels better than the S22 Ultra is Oppo Find X5 Pro. That phone, if you want a phone that is premium and has all the things, except for, in my opinion, needs a better telephoto, not better in terms of quality, but better in terms of optical zoom. Yeah. It's only 2x, which is weird. Yeah. It's the Find X5 Pro. I think is still one of my favorite phones of the year so far. Anyway, so Poco's got another phone too that's $50, 50 euros cheaper, called the Poco X4 GT, and the X4 GT is, I guess, slots between that F4 that we just talked about and the one I reviewed for Elena, the X4 Pro 5G, and that one, and it's just literally they're $50 apart, and so the only difference between these is that you get an LCD on this one, which is a bit weird because they actually have stopped putting. This is another trend I'm seeing from China. Every phone above $300 is a 120 hertz AMOLED. Yeah. Everything. This is the exception. So this is kind of going back in a weird way. But they say it's the best LCD they've ever put on a phone. So strangely, they don't talk about refresh rate, which is weird because I haven't seen a Chinese phone over $300 in 2 years that doesn't have at least 90 hertz. And they don't mention anything. So maybe it's only 60 hertz. That would just really be weird. Anyway, other than that, they switched the processor from a 870 Snapdragon to a Dimensity 8100, which I have on this phone, the Realme GT Neo 3 150 watt. This is a 150 watt charging phone. This also has OIS on a Sony IMX 766 in the back. Wow. This is also a $400 phone. Yeah. That Dimensity 8100, folks, is really nice. Really impressed with it. It feels like a high-end 700 series Snapdragon to me.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the things that I talked with MediaTek's new head of PR about recently. You can't put the two. MediaTek is not a lot of reviews give MediaTek a really bad.
I know, I don't understand why.
And it's just not. You can't it doesn't work. Don't try it or look at people that you trust for reviews, because people will poo-poo MediaTek, and I mean, there are some really bad MediaTek chipsets, but there are also some really bad Qualcomm chips. You know what I mean?
And I'm not just saying this because MediaTek sponsors the podcast pretty regularly. But look, folks, the reality is I've tested a bunch. There's a lot of phones that have really poor implementations of software on MediaTek processors.
Yeah.
You know, like actually some of the recent Moto Gs are not that great on their Helios. Like they just haven't polished the software experience. Like they haven't optimized the software experience.
Yeah.
And it's just a software update away. But like if you go to the higher end, like the Dimensity 1000 and up, even the 900 series and up, I would say. Anything there, you're playing in the same leagues as 600, 700, 800 Snapdragons.
It's fine for for the average person or a little more.
When I finally got my hands on the Chinese version of the Oppo Find X5 Pro, the one that has a Dimensity 9000 instead of the 8 Gen 1, I benchmarked both of them, and the 9000 benchmarked almost identical to 888.
Yeah.
So that's the first time we've ever seen a MediaTek chip do that well. Yeah. And that tells you that they're catching up. I mean, they're about 6 months behind or something, but whatever.
Yeah. But they're not, like, I think they're absolutely fine. And it's the same thing, you know, with, like, Qualcomm had, like, you know, like, the old, like, some of the old 4 Series ones were, like, really bad.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, everyone's got stuff that's a certain price point. So you can't, like, just knock MediaTek out of the park because of they're not Qualcomm, because they're like, honestly, if you didn't know the specs, a lot of times you're not going to be able to tell.
Exactly. If nobody told you there was a Dimensity 18100 in this Poco X4 GT, you'd think, oh, it's 765G or a 778 or something. All right, the next phone I want to talk about, I'm excited about. I got a review net coming. This is my first Tecno phone.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tecno is a company like Infinix that primarily sells to developing markets, so Africa, India, some of Eastern Europe, but I don't know other developed, like all of Africa. Africa, as you know, is a bigger physically continent than, you know, a lot of the other ones. Like because our maps are drawn such a way that Europe and the US look really big on a world map. Africa is actually a bigger continent than, you know, North America or even all of the Americas. And there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of countries there, and they all need internet access, and they have no infrastructure that's wired there. It's all wireless. And so for most people there, their phone is their main computer, like in India, but I mean, even more so. And so there's a whole new group of companies, mostly kind of partially locally based, but with kind of affiliation with China, of course, for manufacturing and engineering, that are making these really amazingly cool looking and spec'd phones with different priorities than what we're used to. At really good price points. And they're starting to reach out to at least the influencers. And I guess because I'm a podcaster, maybe I'm considered to be an influencer. I don't know. But they're sending them to a lot of us now. Infinix has been reaching out to me for over a year and a half with almost all their phones. And this Tecno brand is kind of similar to that. And this is the first time they're reaching out to at least US media with this, essentially their flagship, which is a 5G phone, you know, called the Camon 19 Pro 5G. And here's the thing, guys. I think what got me excited about this, based on my experience with Infinix, is some of them are really great. Yeah. Like, they might be missing things that we consider table stakes, like NFC is never part of the story, because over there it's all QR barcodes for payments, right? But, you know, look at this thing. Doesn't it look like it looks?
It's a nice phone.
It looks expensive. I know it's only like, what, $300 or something? And, you know, they have like a 64 megapixel camera, you know, they have like, I don't know. It just, they have like OIS on this one.
That's what I'm saying.
Wow. 50 megapixel camera for the, you know, zoom.
Yeah, they really hit like
120 hertz refresh. I bet you it's an LCD though, but whatever.
Yeah, so $280.
And you know, here you go. The non 5G has a Helio G96, which is the highest end 4G chip from MediaTek. Oh wow, you're getting a Snapdragon 732 on one of those.
Oh wow.
That is a good chip, guys. The 732 was one of my favorite 4G chips from Qualcomm ever. In terms of bang, it was like super good. Phones that have it, the Pixel 4a non-5G, 732G.
Yeah, I was trying to remember.
Pick other phones that have it. All of the Redmi Notes from Redmi Note 10, last year's Redmi Note. So those are $250 phones from Xiaomi that are 4G phones that have everything but the kitchen sink. Like you're getting 90% of a flagship experience minus 5G for less than a third of the price.
Like I remember 732 was good, and then I think 680 was the other. Wasn't 680 really good?
Yeah.
Like that was...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't seem to mention what chip the 5G version has. So probably a MediaTek is my bet. But look, guys, this is cool. And the thing looks nice. And, you know, again, Infinix has delivered some phones with OLED recently. They mostly did high frequency LCDs up to now, but now they're doing OLED. They've done a phone with a folded telephoto. I have one of those with 5X on it.
Oh, cool.
And they did a phone with OIS as well. And they were all really affordable and nice. I mean, the software is the only thing that's a little iffy in the sense that it's kind of like ZTE, right? It's like, it's there, it works, it's Android, it's familiar, you can use it, it's Play Store certified. But you're like, ooh, it's a bit weird. Like it's, you know, very skinned and a little heavy-handed. And you just, you know, it's not horrible though. And so I have no reference, by the way, for Tecno. I've never used their software yet. But I'm basing this on my time with Infinix. And I believe they're separate companies, but they aim for the same market. So they do very similar things, from what I understand, Tecno and Infinix.
Yeah, because I've only seen them at like MWC, I think. Like, I mean, like,
that makes sense.
Because I see Tecno like every once in a blue moon, but they like pushed this really hard in the US. And then I think a lot of people got excited thinking they were going to release it here for some reason. Because like I remember like they literally were emailing everybody.
I mean that's exactly what they did. Like I think they got a new PR agency.
They're doing something right because
they got the attention. I mean, look, and you know what? Honestly, I've had my eye on them for a while, and I was like, you know, I didn't pursue it because I've got my hands full, but I was like, I hope that one day I get to try one out. And ding, 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 it's happening. And I've asked for the best, right? Because I'm not going to, for our market, we want to see kind of like, what can they deliver, right? Anyway, so I'll let you know, folks, expect an unboxing video at some point, etc. I'll let you know about the Tecno Camon 19 Pro 5G, that name, oh man. Okay, MediaTek Dimensity 9000 Plus, of course, MediaTek would make a plus version of their flagship chip 6 months later, just like, you know, Qualcomm did the 8 Plus Gen 1. That's really all there is to say. Pocket Now, the site that I manage, has a quick comparison. I figured a comparison would be better than just parroting the news. From the table that my good dear writer Roland made, it looks like mostly it's a clock speed bump. And apparently a performance bump on the GPU, even though the GPU is on paper the same. So I'm not quite sure how that works. But you know what? The 9000, as I said, is pretty much an 888 grade chip. And I bet you the 9000 Plus probably matches the 888 Plus. Or maybe even the 8 Gen 1.
And I think we have to get more used to MediaTek, like seeing it more often, because it's actually sort of being a lifesaver right now when you see like Motorola coming out with these phones. Like, you know, Motorola typically always had like, we release our G series in February. We do, you know, like it's been like the same for a while. And this is how they're overcoming like supply chain issues. So it's a really good moment for like MediaTek because, you know, like they're getting in lots of phones all of a sudden and people are like, oh, this is just fine. You know,
it's funny. I have an anecdote to share with you guys. I picked up a prepaid SIM in Canada. I recently moved to Canada part-time. Like I still live in San Francisco as well, but I'm about to sign up with a postpaid contract. Like not contract because I'm not going to do a contract, but I'm going to sign up for like a proper line. But I wanted to get something to hold me over in case I ran out of my free 5 gigabytes of data I get from T-Mobile. So I went to like a kiosk in the mall, and I kind of know what the virtual operators are there. I know them all. I know their affiliates, and they had a really good deal. So I picked up a SIM from Public Mobile, which is a TELUS affiliate. TELUS being one of the big threes there. And the guy at the kiosk was this Canadian Indian, so probably from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh. I don't know. That's I'm assuming. And he was really into phones. You know, he's a young guy. He's selling the stuff. You know. And he had such an anti-MediaTek bias. Like I showed him, you know, we started shooting the shit. I'm like, here's the phones I got on me right now. I'm a journalist. I got these phones. He's like, oh, cool. And we played with the phones. And I told him about this, you know, this awesome Realme here. And I said, yeah, this has a Dimensity 8100. He's like, ooh, MediaTek. I would never buy a phone with MediaTek. So I had to school him a bit. I was like, dude, look, you should not think that way. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, Google has the Tensor chip. It's not Now, admittedly, I don't think it's as good as the Snapdragon chips, but it's still a very solid chip.
Yeah.
You can't do that. And he's like, yeah, you sure? I'm like, dude, I write about this stuff. I review them. I play with them. You're good. You're fine. It's like, geez, it's incredible how much of a bias there is there.
Well, I think that it's sort of like with Intel versus like AMD. For a long time, people thought like AMD was really awful
cheap thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like, there's like, it's like a branding perspective. Like MediaTek's starting to overcome it, but like I said, if you didn't know what's on a phone, you probably would not know the difference between them because they work just fine. I mean, they're good phones and they're usually cheaper, and they're helping us right now because like there are lots of supply chain issues with China and Taiwan, and also noble gas shortages because of the thing in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's definitely, you're going to see more of it, and you're going to see a lot more like interesting phones released, which is sort of cool because in the US, like US phones are a little boring, it's like, and then when you see like stuff like India and Africa, it's like they have like really cool stuff that you never, like some of them have like I remember like LG had like a phone that had like a bug repellent like sound.
Oh, really?
In India. And like some of them have like these monster battery. I mean, it's like that's the stuff that's like fun to cover, not like,
Totally.
300 versions of Samsung A, which is fine if you're going to buy a phone. I mean, it's a great phone to buy, but like not fun to write about.
Not very exciting now. Speaking of weird and fun phones, I got the Poco C40 we talked about last week on the podcast, the $125 Poco phone with a 6,000 milliamp battery and that crazy GLQ processor everybody's ever heard about. And it doesn't suck. I mean, it's not fast. Like, it feels a little sluggish to me, but it's usable. And man, I mean, for $125, I've used way worse phones than that.
Yeah.
So, keep that in mind. Everybody's got a budget and everybody can get a phone that doesn't suck today, which is really cool.
Yeah.
USB Type-C might get mandated in the US. That's the last topic we have. And I think it's exciting, actually.
I think so. Well, I think so too. I have like the new Mac that has like the MagSafe charger.
Yeah.
But I find myself using, when I travel, I have to carry like a lightning cable with me no matter what. And I find myself using USB-C even for this because that lets me carry around basically
less.
Just like I can just carry a laptop charger and do everything.
You just made the exact point I was going to make, which is a lot of people like, I think most people are on board for this USB-C standard, but some people have told me, I'm worried about stifling competition, not competition, but innovation, right?
Yeah.
New ports getting created. And I'm like, nobody says you can't have both. Yeah. AKA your MacBook Pro or the new MacBook Air M2 that has both MagSafe and can charge on either or all of its USB Type-C connectors. Like, why shouldn't that be the norm?
Yeah.
Like, if Apple wants to make an iPhone next year or whenever the mandates in Europe go through, because Europe it's happening, and I think we're going to follow through. I think this is going to happen.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't make sense for Apple to
unless Apple lobbies really hard in the US, I don't think they're in a position to do that right now because they know they're going to have to make the change anyway.
Yeah. So
here's what I've suggested, and I'd like to hear your take. I've been kind of surveying everyone that's been on the show for the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to include, at least on the first model they do that is USB-C compliant, will be portless with a puck in the box that's a MagSafe high-speed puck charging with a USB-C connector on the puck. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they will basically kill two birds with one stone. They always wanted to have no port.
Yeah. And
they will be able to adopt the mandate by including a thing. And then next year they're going to say, oh, you have to buy the extra.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll still include a very basic, just USB cable with a puck attached. Yeah. But I think having the puck completely independent with just a USB, they can even save more money because you bring your own USB-C cord, right?
Yeah.
And it's mandate compliant because it has a USB-C port. It's optional, but it's there.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think a lot of people are like, well, what about data transfer? Dude, like Wi-Fi, like it's fast enough. Like,
or
what
AirShare,
do you need? Or exactly. No, but some people are like, oh, it's not fast enough. I'm like, you haven't used Wi-Fi 6, have you? Like, it's going to be fast enough.
Yeah.
And whatever it's called,
AirShare.
AirDrop.
That's it.
AirDrop, at least between, like, AirDrop, the problem is AirDrop is not universal. But between Macs and iPhone, it's really damn fast on a Wi-Fi network. They really abstract it for you. It's completely transparent. Like, it just works. So, I'm not saying, but I kind of want this to happen simply because I'm not about the e-waste. I mean, obviously that's important. But to me, it's more like I'm a Mac user. I have always been. Because I'm a software engineer. And you're going to say, well, you should be a Windows user then, Visual Studio. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what I used mostly when I was developing video games is Microsoft, development tools. But I'm always at the core a Unix user and not Linux, Unix. Yeah. And Mac is based on Unix. And because it's like it's the perfect storm. I get great hardware, really slick software. I don't have to worry about configuration, anything like that, like you do in Linux or even on PC, where people kind of want to customize, like on Android. It just works. And then if I want Unix, I've got it right there. The compilers are there. I can play around if I want to. Python's there. Everything's there. And then I, on top of that, have like this nice ecosystem of apps, which gets the work done for me. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just happy, but at the same time, I don't like iOS. Like whether it's on iPad, like I've just never really gotten into it. Like I love the hardware. I recommend it to a ton of people. I think the iPad and the iPhone are great. The cameras are wonderful. I use an iPhone for video recording. All my YouTube videos are made on iPhone. Yeah. Not this video because I just happen to have my Samsung Galaxy with me. But like, I just feel like to be really productive for me, I need an Android workflow. I don't customize my Android phones at all. Like I never change the backgrounds. I just, whatever's in the box, I just use. So I'm not that kind of person. It's not about the customization. It's just about the workflow. I feel more productive. I feel I can multitask better. Notifications handled better. It's getting way better on iOS all the time.
Yeah, I feel like they're becoming this. Like to me, like because I used to, like I'm sort of the opposite, to be honest with you. But like now it's like with Android 12, it feels like
shocker.
They feel like almost the same.
You've admitted to the world for the first time publicly that you're an iPhone user.
But I've reviewed enough Android phones to last me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I think the one thing that's like interesting about USB-C, I think we'll get like a big hint with the iPad, the basic iPad that gets released this year, because they need to start transitioning over things like pencil. Like it'll need to be magnetic, because you have to think like those are sold for enterprise use for schools and hospitals and stuff, and they buy those giant like cabinets that are like charging cabinets. Right. So it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to start converting those over to USB-C. So I think that there'll be at least a year or so overlap where you first see like pencil, like the cheapest iPad getting like Pencil 2 support or like some sort of magnetic support.
Yeah.
And then you might not see the switch to USB-C until the following year. So it's not such a big... Well,
absolutely. But I want to see the US taking a stand there too. Because if Europe and the US are like, okay, USB-C has to be the standard for mobile devices, I feel like the rest of us is just going to follow suit. This just going to fall into place.
Yeah.
And, that I think is a good thing, because for me, as somebody who's a frequent traveler, as you said, with your MacBook, it's like even though I have these phones like 150 watt charging, if you use the right charger, this phone will fall back to, I think, 30 watt PD charging.
Yeah.
So like, do I need 150? No, like some people do. And that's why they make these phones. But for me, 30 is good enough. So now I have like a tiny Anker Nano 30 watt PD charger in my bag. I have a 65 watt Anker smaller charger. I have a dual port one. Yeah. Like the point of I have all this USB-C ecosystem. My accessories, this microphone from Shure I'm recording as USB-C. Like my, Sony wireless noise canceling headphones are USB-C. The only thing that I have in my bag that's not USB-C right now, my freaking iPhone 11 that I do video with.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of, I feel, why we need to mandate this. We need to finally get to a point where you don't even have to think. You can borrow your friend's charger and it'll just work.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the thing that I like, because I use an Anker like dual thing too, and my laptop thing. I literally just keep those in my like luggage. Like I keep a backup in my luggage, and I'm like, okay, there we go. Like, I don't have to think about it. I know, like, I won't forget to pack stuff.
I know.
But the one thing is, like, you have to remember Apple Watch and you have to remember iPhone because they're so...
Yeah, and watch is always going to be exception.
Yeah,
like, even this, and a lot of people are like, you really wearing the OnePlus watch? Hey, a year later, they fixed all the software, and it's actually pretty good. And Huawei wanted all their GT watches back, which I really liked. So I'm not using those. But you're going to need a custom charger for this no matter what. Yeah. So that's the reality. Anyway, we should wrap up. Yeah. Steven, you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, like your social media handles and other things?
I mean, so I'm not great at using social media. I mean, like I'm on there. I'm Steven Winkelman on Twitter, Winkelman. I don't really use Facebook.
Are you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm public or not though. But yeah, it's Steven R. Winkelman.
Okay.
Like everything's either Steven Winkelman. If it's Twitter, Steven Winkelman. Everything else is Steven R. Winkelman.
Got it.
But I don't do a ton of like I'm like probably the world's worst tech reporter in terms of like taking photos of products and stuff. I just like post whatever I want. So
do you want to tell them where they can read your stuff right now?
Yeah, so you can find like right now I'm managing Android Police's evergreen and feature, so I'm not writing as much. You can find a lot of my stuff on PC Mag and then older stuff on Digital Trends, of course. But yeah, I mean, eventually I'll move back into writing because I sort of miss it.
You're kind of the same boat as me, because I'm rebooting the Pocket Now website right now.
Yeah.
I'm not writing much. I'm kind of have to like rebuild the entire infrastructure.
Yeah, I don't have the time to do it.
And it's kind of a massive task, but you'll see more writing of mine soon there. And so, as a segue, I'm on Twitter, of course, and Instagram as Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. Like the comic book character Tankgirl, just drop the vowels. If you want to discuss this show with me and Steven, hit us up on Twitter. And of course, Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones, cars, all taken with phones. Check that out. That's how you can stay in touch with social media. The YouTube channels is another way. If you want visual content to go alongside this podcast, like unboxing videos, I mostly do them so that when I talk about a phone, people can actually see the phone physically after they've listened to the podcast. It's youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. The main channel podcast is mostly about the phones and immediate things like wearables, personal audio. But the more channel is like travel tech, car tech, home automation stuff. If somebody sends me a robot vacuum or something, that's cool. I'll just put it on there. The podcast is at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Spotify. So no reason not to find us. Please subscribe to the podcast. You know how to do YouTube. You like, you subscribe, tell your friends, you click notification icon. All that applies to the podcast as well. And of course, comment and let me know what you think. If your app lets you rate or review the show on the podcast, do that. It helps. And of course, I have the Patreon. So for those of you who like to watch the podcast instead and support the show, there's a tier on Patreon for a video version. You get it a day or so before the audio version, and it's for the fans. So if you want to support me, check out Patreon. That's not the only tier. There's a Discord server you can join to chat with me. There's a bunch of other stuff, the benefits you get. So please check out Patreon and help me out with the show. And if you don't like Patreon, that's cool. There's a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click and buy me a $5 coffee or whatever, because that's how much coffees cost in big American cities these days. But I love my coffee, so that's a quick way you can help out. Finally, I want to thank Audible, our sponsor. They've been with us forever, and they're wonderful. So if you want to help the show, there's another option. It's Audible. audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. You get a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a book at the end, whether you stay or not. And I think you'll stay, because if you're like me and you love reading, but you're in front of your computer all day and your eyes are tired, why not listen to a book instead of reading it? And that's exactly what Audible does. It's the #1 audiobook platform in the world. They have all the selection you can imagine. Some short form content, some long stuff, epic books that take like 10, 12 hours to listen to. If you're on a road trip, it's perfect. You just put that on and time just goes by. It's just great. And you can just sit back, put your headphones, earbuds on, relax, listen to a book. You can stop anytime, resume wherever. It's just really nice. So check out Audible. They've been helping us out for a long time, and I hope you help us by helping them. And check out audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And so that's it. Thanks to Audible for being our sponsor yet again. And Stephen, thank you for being my guest this week on the show, dude.
Nice to see you in Chicago.
Yeah, it's in your home turf.
Exactly.
So, folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that, obviously. And I'll have Stephen on at some other time. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.